Hey guys, so in this video we're going to do something a little bit different, and I was looking at some of my older builds that we made like pretty much like week 1, week 2 of the early access, and I was thinking, well, how good or bad were these builds really? Because some of them were definitely quite a bit questionable. A lot of these made without POB and before we really had a lot of info on the PoE2 mechanics, like how bad armor and that kind of stuff really was. And yeah, pretty much thought we'd go over some of them. I remade a lot of the builds in POB so we can actually see how good it really was, DPS wise and tank wise, right? Alright, so I think we start off with the very first one. This is the League Starter, or the Early Access Starter, the build that I played from day 1 all the way up to, I don't know, about tier 15 maps and like tier 1 Zesht and those kind of tier 1 bosses. Pretty much got me into the end game and was able to farm up quite a few divines in maps doing breaches with this build. Might not have been the best build in terms of, like, now if I redid it, probably do a lot of things differently, but it did actually, work pretty much. And while it might not have been the very best, we'll go over a couple of things that, I think were pretty bad in this build, but, it did definitely work. So as far as like a League Starter standpoint, going in blind, it definitely did do its job, I think. Right, so this build, titled #1 Crossbow Build Guide, Witchhunter Galvanic Shards. I sometimes do clickbaity titles and that kind of stuff, but this time it was like, okay, so maybe it was a little bit clickbait, but thing is, you kind of have to understand the state of the game at this point when this build came out, and pretty much at this point everyone is playing grenades on crossbow. If you're playing crossbow, you play grenades because that is the way to go, right? What do you call it, bolt skills? No, this don't do any damage, right? So no one's playing bolt skills, and I pretty much knew that these bolt skills are going to be the actual end game #1 build, because just the way that these kind of skills work, right? And so that's kind of why I titled it the #1 crossbow, because I pretty much knew, maybe not this exact setup, but this sort of bolt style was going to be the #1 way to actually set up your crossbow. Okay, so here we are in POB, and we had to add a couple of things. So basically I don't really know exactly what kind of items I had, so I went through all of the videos and kind of looked at what gear I had, what kind of stats I had, and then sort of just matched up the important things so we can kind of see how much HP we have and that kind of stuff. So if we take a look, first of all, so in order to kind of simulate how much sorcery ward is actually doing, you could see that right now my max lightning hit is about 10k, and 7 or 6k on the elemental max hit. And if we add in sorcery ward, we'll kind of simulate it here. You can see the lightning about 25, and then about 15 to 16, 17k on the fire. So pretty tanky to elemental damage. I'll have to ignore the fizz max hit because this kind of the way we're doing it, just adding ward in the custom config, and that actually will add on to the fizz. So the fizz is actually still only 2.5k. The lightning max hit is quite a bit higher because of the maximum lightning resistance we have. So that's sort of the max hits for the build. And as far as DPS, I think at this point I was still only on a 5 link, and you could see not really all that good, right? Only 300k, but at this point the gear was actually pretty bad. But anyways, this was like good enough to get into the end game and start farming T15 maps and that kind of stuff. Okay, so this tree, there's quite a lot of things going on here, and I think this tree spawned quite a few questionable builds from other content creators as well. But basically the idea was that armor was going to be good. I mean, I'm playing armor stacker in PoE 1 pretty much all the time. That's like the only build I play. And so obviously coming into PoE 2, we're going to be playing an armor stacking build, right? So, and I see these things on the trees, like armor applies to fire damage and this kind of stuff, and sorcery ward as well. And I was like, all right, this is going to be pretty good. But it turns out armor was just bad. And even the armor applies to fire damage, you could see it's like a 0.8% increase on our fire max hit. So actually completely worthless, because the way it works is actually just different. In PoE 2, it applies the damage reduction before armor before resistances instead of after. Very big difference. Okay, another thing, why are we going all the way up to Resolute Technique? And you can see, so I did some kind of like testing, and now like I wouldn't even do this, because basically if we don't get any accuracy, then this node is quite valuable, right? You can see 22% increase DPS because of the hit chance. But it turns out, and I was actually kind of worried that, because there was a lot of talk in the reveal and these kind of things about accuracy being bad at long range, and so basically there's like a accuracy penalty at distance, right? And I was like, all right, I don't want to have to deal with all that. I don't want to have to think about all that. And since I'm going to be going non-crit with Lightning Rod, then might as well just go get Resolute Technique, because that's pretty much what you would do in PoE 1, right? You just kind of ignore hit rating and then just go RT, right? In PoE 2, accuracy is not even that big of a deal, and all you need is about 2k flat accuracy, and you're going to be totally fine. So basically, instead of doing this, you could have just gone and just picked up some accuracy, right? That's like not enough, but right, you get a little bit on your gear, and if we did get it like 1k accuracy somehow, right, we're at 100% hit chance, and then all of this is just completely not needed at all. Also, the reason why I wanted to come up here is because all of the armor was here, the armor applies is here, and I did want to go into all this max risk kind of stuff, right? So there was kind of a reason to do this, but it turns out that it was actually just completely unnecessary, and removing all those points and speccing into more damage, that kind of stuff would have been better. As far as the decision to go non-crit, I think this was also quite a big mistake, and because there is so much good crit on the tree, we could have picked up this crit here, here, and if we went crit on this build, we would have ended up doing quite a bit more damage, I think. And yeah, anyways, it turns out the armor is just bad, and we should have just gotten rid of all of this and gone for just pure evasion. Even evasion life would have been better than going armor. But anyways, it was, interesting build, and it definitely did sort of work, right? I mean, not as effective as it could have been, but definitely did get me through the earlier parts of the league. Alright, so next one we're going to look at is the tank prototype, and I actually really like this build, and I think this one did have quite a bit of potential, maybe even with a little bit of different gearing, like with some of the methods we know now, maybe getting a bit more energy shield and that kind of stuff. This setup would be actually pretty good. And I guess, yeah, the idea is that we're going to be using the Cloak of Flame pretty much to convert physical damage into fire, and then use Sorcery Ward to absorb that damage. Alright, so let's go take a look in PoB and see how good or bad this kind of defense was. Alright, so this is sort of the tree that we ended up using on this build. As you can see, still on this setup too, I'm still stuck on the RT and then I guess the whole armor idea, which ended up being not that good. But anyways, so let's take a look at the build and see how much max hit we have. You can see our Fizz max hit almost at 5k, which is actually, it's pretty much like having 5k ES, right? So even though I only have 2k life, this 2k life for physical damage is worth about 5,000. So almost like 2.5 times our life just by using this Cloak of Flame setup. And if we take a look at our max hit over here, not really all that impressive, but if we do add in the Sorcery Ward, then you can see our fire max hit 31k and then 25k on the other elements, which is actually pretty high for elemental damage mitigation. And then Fizz is like, pretty decent, right? So actually overall for like a I don't know, defense setup, a very cheap defense setup, it did work out pretty good. Probably could definitely be improved on, but quite a bit. Like I said, we get rid of all of these nodes here, maybe get more energy shield, and then go evasion energy shield with Cloak of Flame. That would probably be the better way to do this. But anyways, DPS actually going up quite a bit, and that's, I guess, also has to do is because I did end up getting better gear at the time. We had Ingenuity, we had the Breach Rings. I didn't want to go Hand of Wisdom in action because I was, getting armor in PoE 1 is, the glove slot is really important for getting your armor. You see this is about 15% of my armor. Okay, so overall pretty happy with the build, but probably if I were to redo this, probably cut out this whole area here, all of this stuff here, and then just go crit, and then go for evasion energy shield with crit, and then this setup. Anyways, let's go check out the next build. Alright, so this one is the pure energy shield version. So at this point I was actually pretty curious as to which gearing option would be the best, right? And did experiment with all the different kind of build defense types, like doing pure armor, evasion, hybrid, and then doing pure energy shield, and then hybrid evasion energy shield. I didn't try armor energy shield because at that point it was like, why even bother, because it's just not going to be good. We already knew how bad armor was at that point. But anyways, so this one, pure energy shield, no evasion, no armor, and it did work out like pretty good, I think, except the recovery is actually pretty bad because, well, you can't avoid any hits because you don't have evasion and you don't have any block. So you end up taking full damage from everything, and not as effective as going hybrid evasion energy shield, because then you can get like 50% evasion pretty easily and then avoid half of all the hits, which means you end up taking quite a bit less damage overall in maps and that kind of stuff. Let's take a look at the build. So you can see that we're doing all this work with the Cloak of Flame to try to get all this fizz max hit, and turns out just going pure energy shield is gonna have way better results. And you can see my elemental max hit 25k, right? This is like pretty much the same as our previous setup. We're investing into all this maximum resistance and spending all our dual affixes and like passive points to get tons of max res, but it turns out just go get tons of energy shield and you get the same kind of thing. And that's not even counting our sorcery ward, and I think we were using sorcery ward at the time. Were we? Or actually no, we weren't, because we didn't have any armor. Okay, so this is kind of incorrect, I guess. It was probably something like this, I think. But anyways, on this version, you can see the tree is kind of interesting, going around the world for all these kind of nodes, and I think a little bit inefficient now that I'm looking at it again, and probably would do a lot of things differently. Nowadays I'm actually just coming down this way and then skipping this whole part here, and then I don't really think coming down here is really worth it. Anyways, you could probably cut all this stuff with the massive Thread of Hope and then get your energy shield here, and anyways, so a lot of inefficiencies in this setup as well, but it did kind of work for me because I wanted to test out pure energy shield, and 7k ES it's a respectable amount and enough for me to actually test and see how this kind of setup feels, and in the day I didn't end up really liking it that much. Anyways, so DPS also going up on this setup because we are using Hand of Wisdom in action, right? So obviously the DPS keeps going up, but that's just because my gear did keep getting better and better at this point. I think we are on a 6 link 2 at this point, yeah. Not really much to say about this version because it is inferior to the Evasion Energy Shield setup, but going pure ES, if you're going to go pure ES, I think you need to have over 10k ES. If you get over 10k, then you can probably play without evasion, but like this number, 7k, 8k is just like too low, and you're going to just take way too much damage, right? Anyways, so let's go and check the next build out. Alright, so this one is like we mentioned before, this defense setup ended up being my favorite, and I think the best setup overall in PoE 2 at the moment. If you can go Evasion Energy Shield, you're gonna have a good time pretty much in whatever content you're doing, even if you don't get acrobatics or all that kind of stuff. Just having 40 to 50%, 60% evasion really makes your energy shield that much more effective and helps you against like these shotgunning attacks and that kind of stuff, right? Alright, so this is the POB, and you can see our max hit numbers are actually quite a bit lower, but our sustain is up by quite a bit, because in this setup I had about 73k, or no, 73% evade, and I was also running sorcery ward. Let's take a look at how much max hit we would have with sorcery ward. Oh, so with sorcery ward, we're at about 33k elemental max hit. Our fizz is a little bit lower. It's only going to be about 5.5k, but that's still quite a bit. And so yeah, pretty good elemental max hit in this setup. And if we add in Ghost Dance over here, we're at about 52k elemental max hit when our Grim Feast is fully up. So this is pretty insane. For even our fizz mitigation would have been about 11k fizz max hit, and then 52k on the elemental. So actually really good max hit numbers, and that combined with the 73% evade, it means that this build is probably the actual like tankiest setup that we actually ended up making. And in this version of the tree, basically we had to cut points, right? And still going all the way up here for this. And I think if we just went crit on this setup, it would end up working out like quite a bit much better. And I still wonder why I didn't come all the way up to Spectral Ward, because that would have been a very big evasion and energy shield increase. Anyways, so yeah, there's probably a lot of things I'd redo on the tree. Like you said, first of all, going crit, and then maybe removing some of these nodes that we don't need, like this, and then we can grab this with the large thread of hope, and then end up getting like quite a bit more energy shield and that kind of stuff. Anyways, so overall, let's just undo that real quick. Overall, the build, very tanky, very smooth. DPS, a little bit low, and I think that's also because we're just not going crit. Thing is, like, crit in PoE2 is just insane for scaling damage. If we went and got like all these crit nodes, we got a crit bow, I'm pretty sure we'd be doing like double or triple our current DPS. Okay, but overall this one was definitely my favorite, and basically every single build I made after this followed this exact same gearing with the evasion energy shield setup, which is definitely the best to play. Alright, so next we have sort of a newer build. This is something I actually did make this in game, but it actually didn't really work the way I wanted it to, so I ended up just trashing it. I was going to make a video on it, but I decided not to because I didn't actually like it. But anyways, we'll go over this. This is a pushing sorcery ward to the max build, and you can see we have 24 or 25k evasion with sorcery ward. So that means our sorcery ward is let's actually just do the math properly. So we have let's just say 25k evasion times 0.3 times 1.5, 11k. So it's about 11k sorcery ward. Let's check out with Grim Feast and sorcery ward what our elemental max hit is going to be, and you can see up to 62k on the elemental max hit. Now I thought this was going to be really good, and I was thinking we go to Arbiter and try to tank Arbiter with this setup. But as you'll see in this setup here, he actually just one-shots you. So I'm not sure, maybe he's doing over 60k damage with his hit, or I'm not really sure what is going on. You see just like one complete one-shot. And so either sorcery ward is not absorbing damage before resistances, or he's doing over 60k with that hit, which is pretty possible. I'm probably gonna look in PoEDB. I haven't actually checked it yet, but anyways, so if this setup, because I'm investing quite a bit, this is like an adorned setup with like 10 adorned jewels in it, and if that doesn't actually work, and I cut down quite a bit of DPS. You can see this build in normal adorned setups for crossbow, you're pushing 30k or 30 million DPS. I wanted to see if sorcery ward is actually going to be good if we just push it to the max, 10k sorcery, 11k sorcery ward. I mean, it's kind of crazy, right? And if sorcery ward had quality, like we could add quality to it, then it would be like this 16k ward, and you can see almost 80k max hit, elemental max hit, right? So these numbers look good, but if it can't even tank Arbiter explosion, then like why even do this, right? Because you just go damage and kill them in 1 second, right? But I don't know, maybe at some point when they change all these abilities, maybe the bosses get buffed, skills get nerfed, we actually do have to fight the bosses, then and maybe, you know, Source Reward and Witchhunter gets buffed, then maybe this kind of setup will be a little bit more viable. But at the moment, it's just like there's no point to actually do this, right? You're probably better off going, instead of going for all these, like all my jewels are these like evasion crit damage jewels. If I change all of these into just energy shield jewels, I'd probably end up getting like 10k ES or close to that, or like 7 or 8k ES, and that would probably be way better to play, right? Anyways, so that's gonna be it, I think, for the video, guys. Definitely have been having quite a bit of fun making builds in PoE 2, even though some of them have turned out to be a little bit questionable. But yeah, definitely learning a lot about the way PoE 2 works, and now we have PoB and can actually make some good builds. If you're interested, like, you know, we have probably the best crossbow setup on Witchhunter right now. Using like the Choir Storm, so we don't have to set up any shocks on the crossbow, and then also have probably the best actual setup for crossbow. I haven't tested Deadeye yet, and I'll probably make a Deadeye, I think, at some point, see what it looks like, but probably the best ascendancy for crossbow right now, at least, probably Monk. Or Deadeye, I guess we'll test it out, but even made like a Temporalis crossbow build, which actually ended up being pretty good. But anyways, yeah, so anyways, thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time.